So we're narrowing down our definition of study as the process of taking in information to repeat for evaluation. Or more simply, getting info to spit it out to get a grade. So that's what we're going to focus on here in Study Basics. Get info, spit it out, get a grade. This just being a basic course, we're going to focus on getting the info, and more narrowly, getting the info to get a good grade. When we're talking about you developing your study skills, what's stopping a lot of students is this idea that there's a right way to study. This is presented to students when they first study, like, go find a nice quiet spot. But a lot of students, they do just fine not in a nice quiet spot. And actually that might hurt some students. Being in a nice quiet spot keeps them from soaking in information. So let's get into that. The school system addresses a general audience, so they throw out a lot of information, and it's up to you to get it. It's up to you with your style, with the way you learn, with the way you get information, to get that information. Let's look at this like a car. If a car wants to run in less time with less effort and get better results, it can't do that in a factory. It has to be customized. Each car is different, like each student is different. So you have to take a look. What are the strengths right now? What are the weaknesses right now? And then tweak according to that. Tweak to the uniqueness. And that's what you're doing here. In the factory, you're studying for points. In school, you're studying to get that grade. Right now, you're studying for yourself. You're studying to develop yourself. Maybe you want your study skills to be that much better so you can get more points faster and easier. But the fact is, right now, you're learning for yourself. You're going through Study Basics to benefit yourself right now. So is there a right way to study? Well, there's a right way for you to study. Or more specifically, there's a more efficient way for you to study, unlike any other student. And that takes some customization, so let's do that right now. Ask yourself, how do you best get information? Some students, they need to see the information to get it. Some students, they have to hear it to really have it soak in. Some students, they have to do something with it. They have to play with it in their hands. Some students, they need to share with others. They need to talk about it. They need to have a conversation. Some students, they need to isolate themselves and really go in and play around with it. Maybe get a notebook and start sketching things. Ask questions about it. And what we're talking about here is, how do you best play around with information? How do you best get the information by using it in your own style, in your own way? There's a rhythm to learning, and some students, they best study in the daytime, some in the afternoon, some in the evening. But not only that, but there's a rhythm as you're studying. There's a rhythm as far as keeping pace. And some students use music to do that with them, to keep that rhythm while they're learning. And while you're learning, how much do you categorize what you're learning? How much do you put them in different sections? Okay, here's the studying I'm doing for points. This goes in one category. Here's the studying I'm doing for myself. This is another category. Here's how I best study in one category. Here's how I don't study that well in another category. And compare and contrast. Now, as you can see here, if you ask a student, go find a nice quiet spot to study, and they're a person who needs to share the information, who needs to have a conversation to let the information really soak in, then you're hurting that student. If you're telling a student to find a nice quiet spot, and maybe they haven't developed that rhythm within but are using an MP3 player to keep them moving and focused, well, you're hurting that student. Go sit in a nice quiet spot. Well, they're lost in that nice quiet spot. They don't have that rhythm that they're used to. And again, it may just be a crutch, but it moves them throughout their study. It keeps them focused. So when studying or working on a project, what are the best ways you gather and store information for a test? What are the best ways you get the info so you could ace or pass the exam? More than likely, you've had years of experience, so just go back and then think about the tests that you've aced. Think about the subjects that you just fly through. How do you already do that? And then ask yourself, when studying or working on a project, what are the worst ways you gather and store information? Take a look at the tests that you haven't done so well on. What happened there? And now this gives you some contrast. This gives you something to compare. Okay, I know this works for me. Okay, I know this doesn't work for me. So take a few moments and focus on your own experience. You may be surprised by the knowledge and wisdom you already have. Study is the process of taking in information to repeat it for evaluation. More simply, get info, spit it out, get a grade. And unfortunately, due to time, we're going to be just focusing on getting info in the Study Basics course. Yesterday, I asked you, when studying or working on a project, what are the best ways you gather and store information for a test? And then I also asked you, what are the worst ways you gather and store information for a test? You probably already have some sort of system that you use to study. What I'm going to share with you here in Study Basics is an efficient system to get the most points possible with the least amount of effort. Again, we're focusing on getting the info, but getting the info to get a good grade. So step one is organizing the information. Say you've got lecture notes, notes you've taken from the textbook, maybe some homework assignments, things you've done in class, sections in your textbook. What we're first going to do is organize it so that we can answer this question. Is this going to be on the test? So essentially you'll have two piles. The first pile will be the stuff that's going to be on the test. The second pile will be not on the test. It's amazing how much crap piles up in a binder. Go through all the information you have and then just separate them. This is going to be on the test. This isn't going to be on the test. Might take a little bit of time, but it'll make things a lot easier later on. So some tips in organizing the information. You want to organize it so it makes sense to you. You want to organize it so you can easily find it. And you want to organize it so you can remember it. Not only remember where it is, but also remember the information when it comes time to memorize. Some students use little colored folders or little colored sticky tabs. Some students use different colored highlighters. Me, I start out with big messy piles and then slowly organize within those piles. A good way to think about it is like folders on your desktop or folders in your MP3 player. So here you have rock, and then you have the band name or R&B and certain artist. And then under that artist, you might have albums or just your favorite songs. You could take a look at the chapters in the test or the sections that are going to be covered on the test, same way. So when studying or working on a project, how do you best organize the information that's going to be on the test? If you already have an organization system, how's that working out for you? If you don't, how can you plan for one and make one for the next test you're doing? And then ask yourself, what are the worst ways to organize information for a test? Maybe you've had an open note test before and you've just realized the day of the test, wow, I can't find any of my notes anywhere. Or maybe you've had so many notes that you didn't know where to start. Now you can compare and contrast the best way and the worst way to organize information for a test. You stick with what works for you. We've been defining focus as keeping your attention pointed towards one specific area. We've gone over attention as mental energy. We've talked about the attention age. We talked about how to keep that focus and keep your goals in mind. And yesterday we talked about physical things to consider when we're talking about focus. So today I want to share with you, this being the last day, the most valuable focus technique I have. And that's this. You could only focus on one thing at a time. Now it may seem simple, but let me go over it. Let's say that you're overwhelmed, that you have a huge exam coming up. You know that this final exam is going to cover half the book. It's so huge. There's so many notes that you have. There's so many lectures you attended. You don't know how you're going to even study for this exam. It's so big. So as I focus on how huge and overwhelming that this test is that helping me towards my goal? My goal being to ace this test? Not necessarily. It's actually hindering me because I feel like procrastinating, I feel like holding it off, I feel like a big weight is on my shoulders. So when I ask the most valuable focusing question, how does what I'm focusing on now moving me towards my goal? Well, it's not. So I need to redirect my focus. So what do I redirect my focus on? Well, let's look at the most valuable focusing technique, and that's one thing at a time. So what's the one thing I can focus on right now that'll move me towards my goal of acing that exam? Well, if I look around, I see my bag. Now my bag has the textbook in it, and it has my binder with the notes in it. So the one thing I can do right now is go walk over to that bag and open it up. So that's exactly what I'll do. Now if I ask the question, is this moving me towards my goal? Well, yes it is, because I'm actually getting my workout. So I unzip the bag, I pull out the textbook, and I pull out my binder. Now, what's the one thing in front of me, one thing at a time, that'll move me towards that goal? Well, right now I could open the textbook to the half of the book that I need to study for. Uh-oh, I'm thinking about that half of the book I need to study for. Really? So putting my focus on that isn't helping me towards my goal. I'm feeling overwhelmed again. So what I'm going to do is not think about that. All I'm going to think about is opening it up to the page that I need to open it towards. So I take the book, I open it up to that one page. Simple enough. So I look at my binder. I take a look at the binder. Man, that's a lot of notes. That's a whole mess of notes, and it's not really that well organized. Is my focusing on that helping me towards my goal? No, not really. So one thing at a time, open the binder. That's what I could do right now, one thing at a time. So I open the binder. So now I can look at which note, a note, goes towards this exam. So now I take out A. This one note actually goes to this one exam. Then I move that note out of the binder and put it into a pile to study for the exam. Then I look at the next note. Well, I don't know how that got in there. I throw that away. Then I look at the next note. Again, one thing at a time, going through the binder, one note at a time. Before I know it, I'm done organizing my notes, and I have the book to reference just to make sure that I've got the right sections to study for. So am I going to focus on one chapter at a time? No, that's pretty overwhelming. These chapters are huge. Am I going to focus on one section at a time? Well, that's a little better. So what am I doing here? I'm looking at one thing at a time and constantly asking the most valuable focusing question, which is, how is what I'm focused on now moving me towards my goal? And then constantly reminding myself about the most valuable focus technique, one thing at a time. If you constantly fall back on the question and use this technique, I guarantee you'll be done with less time, less effort, and do a better job at it. By defining motivation as the emotions fueling actions that move you towards your goals. So for example, let's say you're really into somebody and want to go out with them sometime, and so you have these emotions when you focus on that person that hopefully move you to act and do something so you'll get to your goal, which is go out sometime. Here, since we're talking about study, there are emotions you feel as a student that kick you into action that make you take out that book and start studying, or open up that Word document and start typing away. And those actions move you towards your goals, whether that be study for an exam or complete an assignment. So let's take a closer look at emotion, since motivation is very much tied into emotion, and you'll see two base words in both. Motion, meaning movement. And here when we're talking about motivation, we're talking about movement towards your goals. When we're talking about emotions, we're just going to break that simply and say E for energy. So that's energy in motion inside your body. So back to the example of being into somebody and want to go out with them, you'll have this energy inside of you that hopefully will move you into motion. So let's go back to study here. The emotions that students feel can range from, oh crap, I got to study for this exam, or man, I'm going to ace this thing. This thing's done. It's over. So from extreme worry to extreme enthusiasm. So a few questions to check in with yourself here. When studying or working on a project, which emotions move you away from your goals? Which emotions keep you from studying, or which emotions stop you from working? When studying or working on a project, which emotions move you towards your goals? Which emotions fuel you to action towards finishing your study or finishing your work? Of course, this